Welcome again to these commentaries on the scriptures that we find for the 23rd Sunday in Ordinary Time in the Roman Catholic Lectionary. The scripture passages of this Sunday are very meaningful. The first line of the prophet Ezekiel says, "You, Son of Man, I have appointed watchman for the house of Israel." Watchman for the house of Israel. Now, all of you out there have had some experience with watchmen, with people that are security guards, sentinels. Maybe you've had duty in the army of making sure you're at night duty, walking around to see what's going on, or you work in a building for security. But there's a kind of watchman I remember very vividly from something that happened in high school. We went on a retreat. The Catholic high school that I went to, St. Ed's, was able to land a retreat program down at Gethsemane Monastery, the Cistercian monastery. The silent monks, you might call them. They would talk a little bit to you, but they lived lives with silence and prayer. While on retreat at that retreat house next door to the monastery itself, we high school boys, as would be wont, we were supposed to be in bed, but we slowly got out of our little rooms, our little cells, and came down to the basement living room area of the retreat house. There was nobody there in the retreat house because the monks were all asleep in the monastery next door. So we thought we'd have the place to ourselves, and we're chatting and joking and everything else. And suddenly a monk appears walking through the room with an old-fashioned lantern in his hand. Now, we didn't realize that at that point, this is still the 1960s, there was a custom that went back to the Middle Ages, that each night one of the monks was designated to be the night watchman and would be on fire watch. Now, of course, in the Middle Ages, you have to remember there were fires and candles, etc., and monasteries had lots of hay and burnable materials. And so a monk had to go through the whole monastery grounds, like on a round, checking out and making sure nothing would be on fire or start a fire, and warn the monks if there was a fire. So this monk came into the room with us boys joking and laughing with his lantern, actually an old-fashioned lantern he had in his hand. We were sort of astounded because we weren't really aware of something like this happening. And he looked at us. He didn't say a word, just turned around and left. Well, we knew the next day that that monk could talk, because he did talk to the abbot, and the abbot talked to the retreat master, and the retreat master talked to our one of the brothers that was with us, Brothers of Holy Cross that was with us. And we were informed about some rules and regulations that we'd have to observe for the rest of the retreat. This watchman is what I think of when I see this passage, because oftentimes a watchman, of course, is supposed to tell people what's right and wrong. But sometimes your very presence is more than enough to evoke in someone's mind or heart that they should be living differently. Because if your presence, by the way you live, doesn't evoke a question, then what you're going to say may not be that helpful. You know, if you're going to criticize somebody for drinking too much and you yourself are drinking all the time, well, I don't know how far that'll go. If you yourself are upset with how they're spending money, and you spend money without any concern or care, and it's very obvious, it won't go very far. But if your lifestyle and your words go together, then your effect as a watchman is unbelievably further and even greater than possible. So I think it's very important as we hear these words, and then of course Jesus' message in the gospel is all about, you might say, being a watchman for each other. That if you come into a situation with somebody else in your family or your community, how you should address the problem. Oftentimes, things just fester. There's no one says anything, but beneath is a boiling cauldron, we might say, or a boiling pot of being upset with somebody or something. And though the process Jesus outlines is sort of a step-by-step way of doing it, it has its ups and downs, its positives and negatives. But the basic thrust of what Jesus is saying is, let's talk it out and do it in a spirit of charity. And if we do it in a spirit of charity, something will come about, something can change. Sometimes things don't change. As the prophet Ezekiel is also warned today, he said, you may tell them and they don't react, but at least you've told them and you've shared your concern. Let us truly be watchmen for each other, bringing a good warning, a good message to each other. God bless you now.